So in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Fatal Frame 4 Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. And I'm not going to waste any time, let's just get straight into the video. I do want to quickly mention actually that this is the 2023 version of the game, the modern re-release of the game. It's not the 2008 original Wii version that was only exclusive in Japan, so I just want to get that out of the way quickly, but anyway, enjoy. Now starting off with the story, I want to mention how I'm absolutely personally sick and tired of horror games having this way of telling their entire story through just notes. It's just really, really silly, and actually why they can't tell it through cutscenes, visuals, just whilst you slowly play the game. And if some games can get away with this, like Resident Evil would be a good example, where to understand the main story, the main big parts of the story, to really get it, then you can just play the game as normal. You'll experience it through cutscenes and gameplay. Whereas if you want to know the itty bitty smaller details, then you have to read some notes, or you'd have to like dissect the lore like that, but that's only if you want to get really deep into the weeds of it. This game does it differently, where you will not understand the story unless you read so many notes. I gave up there's 12 chapters in this game, not including the prologue, but the prologue's extremely short, so there's really 13 chapters in this game, or phases they're called, and the cutscenes that happen in these phases, everything that's told through the story, you will not get unless you read the notes. I know this because about phase 2 or 3, I think it was 2, but it may have been 3, I gave up on reading the notes because even in just the first phase, which doesn't even include the prologue, in just the first phase, there was too many. The story itself seems fine. I don't think the story itself is bad in my eyes, at least what I understood of it, but all of what I understood from it was after the game, because although I did watch all the cutscenes, I didn't really understand it too well. I knew the extreme basics, or at least I believe I do, of just playing the game. But knowing anything even remotely in depth, well, to be fair, not even in depth, you need to read. It's pretty much essential to understand. Well, no, not pretty much. It is essential to read the notes if you want to understand the story, or look at someone else's YouTube video. You can't do it just playing the game with cutscenes, and it is a bit annoying because it's some of them are very, very long. The only reading I don't actually mind is after each chapter. Well, this only begins, I think, the third chapter, or is it the fourth phase it begins? But I think it's after phase 3 as you're beginning to phase 4, and from then onwards, after every phase, you get a summary of each character story, because you play as 3 different characters, and you get a quick summary of what they've experienced in case you forget. I think that's fine. If you already know and you don't care, you can just skip over it, but you get a little summary, and it helps you understand it if you didn't understand what they went through. Speaking of which, the characters are fine, although I didn't particularly like the acting in the game. Now, I don't know whether this is, because for me personally, I believe it's more script than it is voice acting. Now, I don't speak fluent Japanese, you can take that into account, of course. However, I do not believe it was the voice acting, I believe it's more the script. Japanese games, or horror games specifically, seem to have this way of trying to be uncanny. I don't know if they're trying to copy certain games. I've never played the original Fatal Frames. This is the only Fatal Frame game I've played besides Maiden of Blackwater, which I played for an hour and a half, so I've not experienced any of the other Fatal Frame games, so I'm assuming they're similar, I suppose. You play as Ruka, who is the main character. She is the main one. She's the one on the cover art. She's the main character. Then you've got Misaki, who you play as the least, I believe, although maybe she's drawing with the guy character you play as. She plays 3 characters, a detective called Chosiro. I believe he's a detective. Ruka was my least interesting, even though she's the one you play as for the most amount of time, about 50% of the game you play as her. However, I feel like the main issue was the way the story was told, with all the notes being shoved down your face. I'm not going to go into depth on the story, but you can just look it up online if you're really interested, or play the game yourself. But I wasn't particularly a fan of the story. It was absolutely average at best. It was fine, but the way it's told made me just lose all interest in it, because it's just it's told in a non-pleasant way. Now, going into gameplay, the thing that the game's probably well known for is the camera combat, and the camera combat is actually solid in this game. I actually really, really liked it. One of the characters, the male character, actually has a flashlight that you use, and his combat is by far the easiest, but I feel like it's meant to be to show he's a bit more experienced. The other 2 girls have different cameras, I believe, but they do have cameras, and they work the exact same way. But the camera, the upgrades you can get for the camera, you also can get different lenses for both the flashlight and the cameras, which, you know, one might be like a flashbang and one might give you a more powerful shot. These are like special abilities that you charge whilst using the camera, and I thought the camera overall, and the flashlight as well, was really, really cool, and I did like the change up when the guy used the flashlight. I didn't expect it. I was like, oh wow, because you play as the 2 girls before you play as the guy. So I was a bit shocked. I was like, oh okay, that's pretty cool. That being said, with some of the fights against some of the ghosts, they are too long for me. I played on normal. There's easy, normal, hard, and then I believe if you beat the game on hard, you get nightmare mode. But I just played the game on normal, standard, bog standard difficulty, and I felt like there were a few fights. Most of the fights were absolutely fine, but there was one especially right at the end, just before the final boss, that had like 3 phases, and I know it was a build-up to it because you were fighting somebody who was important to the plot, like their spirit, their ghost, but I didn't like it. Like, one quick fight with them would have been easily acceptable. It was a bit too long, and it happened quite a few times where I was like, oh, gosh. But most of the time it was absolutely fine, at least on normal difficulty. Upgrading in the game is not easy. Upgrading your camera and your lenses is not easy, but it's very well done, and it actually, when you get these like little gems, red ones to upgrade the lenses and blue ones to upgrade your camera and or flashlight, and they actually go through each character, like they follow each character, if that makes sense. So if you pick one up as Ruka, one of the girls, then if you play as a male character, Chosuro I believe his name is, you can actually use those to upgrade his. Like, they all share them, which some people may not like. I liked it, I thought it was actually alright. There's also a ghost hand mechanic in gameplay where if you go to hold out to grab something, there is a chance a ghost hand tries to grab you, and you have to quickly pull back, otherwise a ghost will grab your hand and you will lose that. Now, on normal mode at the very least, I didn't experience this very much at all, which is a good thing, because if it's constant, then it'll just get to the point where it's boring or tedious. However, I do think it's a cool mechanic, because it actually warrants there being the slowly grabbing your hand out to get something. And later on in the game, I actually expected it not to ever happen again, because it just never happened, and then I got tricked by it and it happened. It's not scary at all, and we'll get into the horror in this game at some point, but I did like the mechanic. I found it being a nice, pleasant little part of the experience. It wasn't anything major, but I noticed it and I was like, you know what, that's pretty cool. And it actually had me at one point reloading a save to get, so I got, I think, was it 10 upgrade points from one of them, and then I reloaded, and then I died, and then when I went back to get those points, a ghost hand grabbed me, and then because I didn't want to lose those points, I reloaded the save again, so I save scummed basically. So you can actually lose important stuff, so it's a kind of, I like the mechanic. Now, one thing I really didn't like was the puzzles in this game. There's very few, and they were all really stupid. There's one which was, it's so easy, it's laughable. There was another one which I really struggled with, but I'm not very good at this type of puzzle, so I actually had someone else do it for me, and it's the only part of the entire game that's not played by me, because I genuinely cannot do these puzzles. But the reason I struggled with this one so much is because you can't look up a guide online because it's randomly generated. I hate games that do, I just had this issue with Amnesia the Monk that I just reviewed. I hate games that have random generation when it just seems silly. And this is a perfect example. Like, why is this, of all things, just randomly generated? But this puzzle, every time you click into it, you have a different, like, the parts on the board move to make it different each time, but that doesn't add anything. If anything, it takes away. If you struggle with this type of puzzle like I did, I would have actually been locked for about 30 minutes at least, if not longer, if someone didn't do it for me. You could say that's a skill issue, but at the same time, there's no reason for it to be randomly generated. Also, there's a puzzle in the game which was just broken. I did it right, at least I believed it was right, and then it wasn't working, so I looked up a guide online, and then they did it the same way I did it, but it worked for them and not for me, and I was really confused. And then I finally found out, after about 10 minutes of faffing around, that there's actually a glitch in the game, or bug in the game, however you want to word this, and makes you not be able to finish the puzzle for whatever reason, so I had to reload the game, and then the puzzle worked perfectly. But there was one guy on a forum that had an issue with this, so I assume this must be a greater issue if I found someone on a forum that had an issue with it. But the fact that this seems to be a problem, and it wasn't just extremely unique to me, is bad. The fact that, like, I could have been stuck on this puzzle for ages if I didn't realise this. That one guy in that forum saved me. It's really awful. There's also many doors within the game that say they're held down by a powerful force, which I really disliked. There was a time where I wanted to get to a location. I had to get to a location to, I think this was phase 10, I believe, and you have to get to a location to progress a story. And I wanted to go one way, but it was like, no, you can't go this way. So then I went the other way. But then when I went the other way, without having any ghost encounters or anything, I ended up where I would have been if I went that other way anyway. Like, it's so, you'll see it with the gameplay, but it's so silly. Like, why close it? Why not just let me go through it and I can go 2 ways to the same location? And they do this quite a few times within the game. It's like, why can't this door just open? It wouldn't change anything. I don't understand. It wasn't like going the other way. I had a cool spectre encounter, which spectres are the ghosts you can take pictures of. There's ghosts that attack you in the combat, and then there's ghosts you take pictures of because you're like well, at least with one of the guys, you're an investigator, I suppose. I don't know what the other girls are taking pictures of people for. I suppose to get their memories back because they've got amnesia throughout the game. But it's not like you have any of these ghosts to take pictures of whilst you go the other way. It's not like the other way has anything special. Like, I don't understand why I couldn't just go it seemed a bit silly. The last chapter also has horrible save points. There was that awful fight, the second to last fight you have with this guy where you fight him about 3 times. It's like 3 different phases, even though they're all the exact same. But I died to him once and had to restart 20 minutes of the game because there's no save point in between, which is really stupid. So there's one save point, but besides that, the rest of the save points are placed rather well. It's just this one save point right at the end. Like right at the end, there's just, yeah, it's just placed terribly. And speaking of which, the final boss fight is rather awful. I don't like things that are harder just for the sake of being hard, but this boss fight was far too easy, and it wasn't, considering the build-up of this character, it was not very well done, I don't believe. It was very boring, no unique moves, it was a boring, easy boss fight. Getting onto the visuals, the characters to me look too tall. This is one that, it's not really a criticism necessarily, it's more just something I noticed and I wanted to mention. They just look, I don't know if the building's meant to be small, and this isn't just the male character, the girl characters as well, I believe they're meant to be 17, but correct me if I'm wrong. But they literally look like they're about to smash their head off the door. I don't know if Japanese places are smaller, I don't know, it's just something I noticed. It's not that big a deal, it's just something I noticed. I like how the save points are also shown throughout the world. I know I said one location of a save point was really bad earlier, but the vast majority are good, and also the way they're shown, it doesn't disrupt from the visual aspect of the world. It's not too in your face, I do like it. That being said, when you get to your first save point, you're introduced to costumes, and I had the, is it deluxe edition of the game? Anyway, the special, the more expensive version of the game. So I got a bunch of free costumes, and my gosh, they look so, I hate these costumes. Now, you can turn them off. Even the default costumes, however, well, at least with the girls, I find a bit silly. It just seems a bit weird that you'd go ghost hunting in this attire, but, you know, I guess I can suspend my disbelief. It's not that big a deal. But these outfits, like, I could not wear them because they put me off the game. If they're not too big a deal because you can just not wear them, but I literally could not play the game with these outfits because they would put me off. I do like the limited HUD, mind you. The limited HUD in the game is really, really well done. As I mentioned earlier, there's spectres in the game, which are these ghosts that do not attack you. They may eventually end up attacking you, but they're ones you take pictures of to get points, and like their photos can be collectibles as well, but like 100% in the game. And if you're going the right way to an objective, usually you'll see spectres pop up, so it tells you basically you're going, it's like a waypoint without being an in-your-face arrow or waypoint or telling you go to this room. You'll just follow a ghost and a ghost will go through a room, so you know you've got to go through that room. And it's a really cool way to show a waypoint without being in your face and taking away from the experience. The third-person camera I also think is done very, very well. This is part of gameplay as well, I suppose, but the third-person camera is done very, very well. It never really got in the way of gameplay. So yeah, this probably should have been more gameplay. I've got it written down here as visuals, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably more of a gameplay aspect. But the third-person camera is done very, very well. It never got in the way. I thought for the tight corners, the tight-knit corridors it's in, I felt it was done very well. That being said, the world as a whole does look rather... It doesn't look ugly per se, it just doesn't look particularly great either. It would have been something that wouldn't have bothered me too much, have the game be far better than I believe it is. And it definitely didn't detract from my experience too much because I did end up completing the game and I very rarely noticed, but there was quite a few times where like a texture would be really bad, or it just makes me think that we need a new Fatal Frame game. I know this is the 4th one and then the 5th one is Maiden of Blackwater, I believe. I don't think there's a 6th one. If we can get another Fatal Frame game, because this one is Fatal Frame 4, which is it's not a remake, but it's like a remaster of a game from 2008, and it does look better than that game, sure, but it does also look like it could do with a longer time in the oven. It just, there's something off about it, and it's not the particular art style I think they're going for. I do think just some of the assets look rather poor and low quality. It's nothing to do with the art style, I don't believe, because I understand just because a game isn't photorealistic doesn't make it bad, of course, but I don't think it's that. I think it actually just looks rather poor in some places, but it's not that bad. And there are some parts I do like about the visuals, like light coming through a window and stuff, and there are some parts of the visuals I do genuinely like, but for the most part, I feel like it's missing that touch. Now, getting into the sound in the game, I really hated the sound in this game. I thought it was absolutely abhorrent. It seems like they just played random sounds that were just meant to be scary, that you'd go into a room and randomly some random sound would start playing, which was so in your face, like please be scared type thing. I hated the sound in this game. There's this room, which if you don't know this, look it up, please. If you don't know this sound that I'm going to reference, but there's a room that sounds like the Black Ops 1 numbers sequence. If you know what I mean, if you know what it is, listen to this. There's also a room that sounds, well, it's not sounds, it is ripped from The Grudge, where you can hear like the croaking of the girl from The Grudge. And it's not inherently bad, like, and it's clearly a reference to that, I suppose, because they would know about it, wouldn't they? But it just doesn't really make sense for the, like, why is it there? Like, this is a girl's room, but why is she croaking creepily? I don't think, like, there's just no reason. I half expected there to genuinely be a room where Freddy Fazbear was in the corner, and you heard his music box start playing. Like, some of the sounds were just so silly. I really didn't like it, and then you'd get into a boss fight, and there'd be really intense music, like the ghosts' sounds are better enough. You hear whispering occasionally, like there would be ghosts and stuff, and it's actually one of the cases in a horror game where disembodied whispering actually makes sense, because usually I hate it just seems like it's forced, but in this game it actually makes sense. But the sound design in general is just so poor. There's a room you'll go into, and nothing, there'll be no sounds. You go into the next room, randomly some loud sound starts playing, which almost jump scares you at how loud it is, but not in a good way. I really, personally, I really hated the sound design in this game, and I thought it was absolutely awful. And finally, horror-wise, this game's not scary in the slightest. I mean, at least in my opinion, I found it not scary in the slightest. I do appreciate that this game didn't have any cheesy jump scares, because they easily could have done that with a ghost that just jumps in your face, and it'll make you scared, like it would make you jump in your seat. So I do appreciate that, and I'd rather it be like it is than have those cheesy jump scares. So I do appreciate that. However, the game is not scary at all. I can understand why it's classed as a horror game, but it's tilting on that line for me, because it's really not scary at all. I forgot I was playing a horror game whilst playing it. The designs of the characters themselves are fine, I suppose. The designs of the actual ghosts are all very generic. They all seem very similar to one another. There's a very few that you think are unique. There's a few that are unique, but even then they don't attack you in unique ways. You'll be fighting the same enemy 50 times. It's just, the enemies are not very scary in this game. They're really, really not. I'm not saying a variety would have made it scarier, because I don't think it would have. And some of the ghosts don't even look scary. Some of them just look like normal people with maybe a bit of blood on them. Like the ghosts aren't scary at all. The game itself isn't scary. The ambiance is abysmal, so it's definitely not scary. Anyway, that is my review on Fatal Frame 4 Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. Before doing this, actually, as I've played the game 3 or 4 days ago, building up to recording this, I actually thought to myself, I liked this game. I thought it was decent, but now that I've done the review, I realised just how much I actually didn't particularly like certain aspects of the game. But what do you think about Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse? I'm really interested. Obviously, the one that I played, the 2023 version, not the original 2008. I'm sure there's differences, although there may not be, but besides graphically, of course. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching, and yeah, I'd be interested in your opinion, even if it's very, very different to my own. But thank you.